Hey guys, my name is Obsidian. I've been a gay character in DC Comics ever since the late 80s. Yet people at DC Comics won't do a series about me when they talk about LGBTQ representation. No, when they go out here and talk about LGBTQ representation, what they do is announce that a character like Tim Drake here is a bisexual, and then get a whole lot of clickbait articles made about him, generating a lot of controversy, but not generating any sales. Meanwhile, openly gay characters like myself wind up in the background, completely ignored and never talked about, even though I've been around for over 30 years. And that again shows you how shallow these woke people are about representation. It's all about them being able to create these clickbait articles to get attention for themselves and not about any actual representation. Because where's the Obsidian comic? Because I've again been here for over 30 years and nobody ever wants to give me a push, even though I've been around longer than every other gay character that DC Comics has ever been around. And there have been gay characters in comics for years, like your Madame Fatal and many others, but the woke people can't get any brownie points with those characters. And that's why people are so upset, because Tim Drake here is openly heterosexual, yet they want to push an agenda and push their politics ahead of great storytelling. And I've had many great gay stories, but nobody ever wants to talk about any of those.
Now available on Kindle, E-Steam No Good Deed. The Devilish Diva scares some stick-up kids straight in this action-packed E-Steam series comic. Get E-Steam No Good Deed on Kindle for 99 cents today.
DC Comics announced that your Jonathan Kent, their new Superman, the son of Kal-El, the original Superman, was coming out of the closet as a bisexual. And the reaction from many comic fans on this announcement was a collective sigh and rolled eyes. Now, the reason why many comic fans sighed and rolled their eyes is because just 2 months ago, Tim Drake, the third Robin, was announced to have come out of the closet as bisexual. Now, these announcements, in the eyes of many comic fans, is coming across as extremely disingenuous as related to representation, and it's looking like one big gimmick to try to generate controversy. Now, the reason why many comic fans see this as a gimmick to generate controversy is because this hasn't been the first time that DC Comics has announced that a character has been bisexual. No, your DC Comics, in addition to announcing that your Jonathan Kent and your Tim Drake were bisexual, also announced that your Selena Kyle and your Wonder Woman were also bisexual. And again, these announcements, they were not really designed to go out here and give comic fans an incentive to go out here and buy more comics. No, these announcements were designed to virtue signal to audiences that don't normally buy comics and create a controversy where they could get their name out in public with mainstream media platforms like Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, The New York Times, Time Magazine, and many other publications owned by the same media platform, and get the attention of the general public with a shock marketing statement designed to shock people into paying attention to DC Comics, which have not really seen an increase in readership over the years and are at an all-time low compared to those manga sales. Now, this kind of stunt has been done in the past over at Marvel, and I remember back in 1992 or so when I was in high school and I picked up Alpha Flight issue number 105. Now, in issue of Alpha Flight 105, the character North Star came out as gay, and this at the time was really done as a gimmick because the Alpha Flight comic had been struggling for over 5 years. I mean, Bill Mantlo, the original writer of Alpha Flight, for a while after John Byrne, he was struggling with the book and actually apologized for how bad it was. And I believe his name is John Camilleri and James Hundle. They've also apologized for how bad that book was. And the book was struggling for years, and they decided at the time to announce that the North Star character would come out of the closet. Now, this again was done to get the attention of readers and get them reading a book that had been struggling for years. Unfortunately, this did not have much impact on Alpha Flight sales. Now, after your North Star came out of the closet in issue 105, this is where the Alpha Flight sales started to really, they went back to their falling levels, and by issue 130, the book was canceled in 1994. And the same paradigm has followed many comic books over the years that push this kind of what they call social justice narrative. Yes, they will announce these characters are a certain ethnicity or a sexual orientation, and what will happen to these books is, yes, this will generate a whole lot of controversy, and it will lead to a lot of articles written in your mainstream platforms like the New York Times, your Hollywood Reporter, your Variety, and Time Magazine. But this will not lead to large numbers of comic fans heading to comic book stores to pick up said books. And what happens is, after these announcements of this so-called announcement of their sexual orientation or whatever ethnicity, what will happen is these books will not sell overall, and eventually, usually these days, within 8 to 12 issues, said book will wind up getting canceled. Now, again, yes, these announcements will get a lot of people talking online, on message boards, and on places like Facebook, but it does not really give people incentive to go out to the comic store to pick these books up. And again, this has happened ever since the days of North Star in 1992, and it has happened with the announcement of characters like the Rawhide Kid in 2001, and it has not really generated much sales. It's just generated, again, a lot of people buzzing online, and it's a marketing stunt that comic companies really need to stop doing, because it really ruins the whole idea of representation, and it also shows how disingenuous these companies are. And the reason why I say they're disingenuous is because you have all of these characters like Obsidian and Maggie Sawyer who have been sitting on DC's shelf for years, but we don't see anybody at DC openly going out to talk about creating an Obsidian series, and we don't see anybody talking about doing something like giving Maggie Sawyer a push, even though Maggie Sawyer was featured prominently in Superman, the animated series, in a lesbian relationship, and your Obsidian had been featured in Infinity Inc., a third-tier DC book, as in a gay relationship. Again, you've had these kind of characters in comics for years, and that's why people say it's extremely disingenuous when they make these announcements, because instead of taking one of the already established LGBTQ characters and giving them a series and seeing if this character can carry a series on their own merits, what they do is go out here and try to make an already established character a different sexual orientation. And again, that is extremely disingenuous, extremely dishonest. And in the case of DC Comics, we have seen this dishonesty, because they will announce a character like Wonder Woman or Catwoman as bisexual, but then we will never see them participating in any sort of lesbian relationship. Again, an announcement to get their name in the papers, but not an effort to go out here and give you, again, genuine pushes for supporting the LGBTQ lifestyle. No, they won't go out here and give series to already established gay heroes like Obsidian, like Apollo and Midnighter. No, they won't give those characters a push. And again, that shows you how disingenuous your DC Comics is about representation and how it's all about them trying to generate controversy that really has turned many comic fans apathetic regarding your DC Comics. And the reason why so many comic fans are apathetic is because they've seen these stunts 100 million times, and they've seen the end result of these stunts ever since 1992. And because they've seen the end result of these stunts, meaning that we're not getting quality stories with these characters, and we're just getting gimmicks to try to shock casual readers, what happens is they stop buying comics, and that's why comic sales are at an all-time low, and readers are walking away from mainstream comics over to manga. And the reason why they're walking away from mainstream comics over to manga is because in manga, if they do alphabet characters, they do alphabet characters in organic stories where the characters get development and action, not any sort of virtue signaling to try to generate some quick sales and an effort to try to shock people into paying attention to a character. Because in publishing, you really cannot shock somebody into going out here and buying your comic. No, if you don't have a story on the first 3 pages, then the reader is not going to care. And if the reader just doesn't care about your character, it doesn't matter what their race is, their sex is, or their sexual orientation is. If there's no reason to care about that character or their story, then there's no incentive for the reader to go out here and pick up said comic. And that is something I think his name is Mark Cherry at DC Comics, has not learned. He's making the same mistakes that your Dan Didio did and your Axel Alonso did at Marvel, and the same thing as your CB Cebulski, trying to shock people into buying comics. But controversy doesn't generate sales. No, good storytelling generates sales, and that is a lesson that many at DC Comics still have not learned, and it seems like they're not really understanding. Readers don't care about a character's sexual orientation. No, they care about the content of that character, and they want to see this character be a quality character. Now, there are some people who are saying that they did this to Tim Drake because they did not know what to do with him, and the same thing with your Superman, that they did this because they don't know how to write those kind of stories. But I can easily think of a great way to write great Tim Drake stories that don't involve sexual orientation, because the original intention of Tim Drake was to learn how to be a great detective like Batman, and he was working with Batman because he understood Batman needed a Robin. But now that there's Damian Wayne, yes, you could still have Tim Drake as Robin, but he's a different kind of Robin in that he's going to a different city. He's learning different techniques from different detectives like the Elongated Man, like Detective Chimp, and many other kinds of detectives. So you could still do great Tim Drake stories where he is a detective, and like his mentor who trained to be the world's greatest detective, he's trying to expand on his skills. And that's a very easy story just off the top of my head regarding what you could have done with Tim Drake. He didn't have to stay in Gotham anymore. He could still be Robin, but he's a Robin who was out here traveling and, like his mentor, learning how to be the world's greatest detective. And when it comes down to your Jonathan Kent, he could be a completely different Superman. He's fighting for truth and justice, and he's fighting for truth and justice with a more gritty approach. I mean, you could say that he's more of a street level type Superman. I mean, you could do different things with these characters and tell different stories that would allow them to be distinct. Unfortunately, we have a lot of comic writers who all they're thinking about is trying to shock people into picking up their books with flashy gimmicks instead of focusing on substantive storylines the way legendary writers like Chuck Dixon and Marv Wolfman did. Because when you have a great writer like a Chuck Dixon or a Marv Wolfman, they put more substance in their stories, and that's how we got characters like Dick Grayson transitioning from a boy wonder into becoming his own man. Your Marv Wolfman evolved the Dick Grayson character from a sidekick to his own hero, and your Chuck Dixon made Tim Drake into a distinct character who carried over 100 issues of a Robin book, plus multiple miniseries, and it's really sad to see that a character that Chuck Dixon made into a viable property all his own, and Marv Wolfman with Nightwing made into a great character, are messed up by bad writers who just don't want to go out here and put in the work that I do in a story and go out here and put some substance on the table. And again, these announcements that a character's about a sexual orientation, this does not, again, get people excited about comics. No, if you want to get people excited about comics, you're going to have to come to me with more of a story, and you're going to have to come with something that makes the reader care. Because the three critical questions a writer has to answer to a reader are: who is the main character, what do they want, and why should we care? And it's hard to care about a character when all that we know about them is their sexual orientation, because that's not a reason to care about a character, because that's not a story. I mean, what does that character hope to accomplish after they announce they are whatever sexual orientation they are? That's the critical question many writers need to start asking themselves. Yes, your character is whatever alphabet orientation, but how does that make the reader care about the story or the conflict that they need to overcome? How does that factor into the story? Because when you're writing a story about superheroes, it's about the hero overcoming the villain, and you have to give me a reason to care about that hero's mission, and you have to give me a reason to care about that hero and the challenges they overcome. And a character's sexual orientation, yes, that's a nice surface trait, but it doesn't really give us any layers as related to their characters. And this is why many of these announcements fall flat and wind up leading to no sales, because people, after reading this story, there's nothing really there. I mean, the Obsidian back in the 80s did a story about coming out, and the same thing with North Star. It's been done, and we've also had great stories with gay characters like Apollo and Midnighter, but what people are tired of are these announcements that really don't bring anything substantive to the character and really don't really add anything overall, because it's just an empty symbolic gesture of representation, but it doesn't really bring any substance to the stories, and it really doesn't really give us anything out here when we've, again, already got established LGBTQ characters who are already telling great stories, like Cassie Hack in Hack Slash and many others. I mean, there are already established characters telling great stories, so we want to see that in the comics, but we don't get to see it because all these editors are thinking about is trying to shock people to generate sales, but shocking people doesn't generate sales. No, great storytelling generates sales, and great storytelling is the only thing that can save the comic book industry. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of hacks working in the business, and these hacks are not interested in giving us great comics. No, they want to try to shock their way up to Hollywood, but shock does not lead to a lot of awed comic fans, and if you don't have awed comic fans that generate sales, then people have no incentive to go out here and buy your comics. Now, my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for 99 cents, and you can find that book on Amazon.com. And my second comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is 50% complete from the artist, and I'm hoping to have that book on Kickstarter soon. So stay peeled to pick up the John Haynes at Death's Door, and I'll be making an announcement regarding John Haynes at Death's Door once the art and lettering are completed. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics and make more comics, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my action-packed SJS Direct fantasy fiction like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today.